I can't think of anybody that I've spoken to over the last several months since I've been back and forth between Lebanon and the States who has said they will vote for Biden. That said, that is, that's just my immediate family and then some of my extended family. And there are some people in my extended family who used to be Republicans, by the way, but stopped voting for them a long time ago, especially like post-war on terror era, because of the hatred and racism towards Arab Americans specifically. But yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of support for the idea of third parties. I think I heard one person maybe mention RFK. And that's about it. I mean, and then there are a few people are just like, I'm never voting again until there's like more than just Democrat and Republican. So I think for the Arab American community, this has been a really eye-opening moment more than any other time in all of the last however many years that the US has just been like obliterating country after country across the Middle East.
Yeah, I guess I mostly am curious about how much sort of like awareness there is of the pro-Palestine campaigns in the mix. I also left off Dr. Cornelius. I certainly didn't mean to do that.
Oh, but yeah.
But the reason being only because it does seem like from a ballot access perspective that Jill Stein is the one that is already on 270 electoral college votes worth of ballots across the country. And going independent is very difficult to do. It's very expensive without a party apparatus, especially to get on the ballot. And Dr. Cornelius has just been struggling a little bit with that because he's not RFK Jr., who went out and could get a billionaire VP to sort of pay his way to get on the ballot. And even RFK Jr. is struggling in ways that I think he didn't anticipate. So it does seem like the only anti-war choice that's going to be on most ballots. And of course, Claudia de la Cruz is wonderful, but again, the ballot access issue. So it does seem to me to come down to Jill Stein. And it does seem like an opportunity for the left and for pro-Palestine Arab Americans to rally around a real threat to the duopoly. But I'm just curious how much that kind of a message, like there is only one anti-war candidate that's going to be on the ballot, is really penetrating, outside of like lefty communities.
Well, I think it depends which community you're in. I think for Arab Americans who have been really like engaging and going to protests in major cities, they've learned a lot about these third party candidates. Because I remember back in, I think it was in January, there was a big protest in DC. And I happened to be in the States for that. And I went and all my sisters came with me. And Cornel West spoke there. Jill Stein spoke there. I don't think Claudia de la Cruz was there, but she might have been.
No, but she was at the last one. I'm not sure if she was. I was there as well in January, but there was one like 3 or 4 weeks ago by the Red Line one by the White House. Right. Jill Stein was there, and Claudia de la Cruz was there as well.
So it's been I think a lot of these protest activities, which a lot of Arabs have been participating in, has actually introduced them to the third party side of things in a way they hadn't been really introduced to it before. And on top of that, I mean, look, we all know that a third party is not going to win, right? We know that they're not going to be president. It's about sending a message and about being able to, rally around and organize around this kind of movement building that a lot of them have become a part of over the last several months. And I think that's the importance and usefulness of the third party candidate situation when it comes to president. Right now, it is a way to send a message, and it is a way to get organized around something that is not the Democrats and not the Republicans and pushes them. So I think that's really important.
And I do think, I will say, I know it sounds crazy, and I know that there's a reason that people frame it as, I know we're not going to win because, you kind of want to anticipate that criticism from people. And yes, I understand. But I think there's something that people are really loving about RFK Jr. because in part, he is posturing himself as someone who can be a real winner. I am a Kennedy. My family owns the White House. I have, really official looking merch and website stuff. And I have all this money to do Super Bowl ads. And we really can take it to the system. So I do sometimes hesitate about saying that, especially because I hope one day the whole point is that we do break the duopoly and these third parties can in fact win. But even short of that, I'm thinking to the example of France. And you earlier said, you made this argument that I don't know that, there's not enough time left. I don't know why they're really delaying if they're going to choose to swap Biden out. People have been saying as a counterexample, well, look at how quickly various European countries, including in this case, France, are able to put on their elections. They only take a month or 2 months or something for the whole process. And in the case of France, you have a left that actually was able to form a coalition government now and have what never happens in the United States of America, where the center has to side with the left to win and defeat fascism, instead of moving farther and farther to the right and ultimately losing regardless. And I do wonder if that gives you any pause about, one, the value of agitating for a replacement for Biden, and two, agitating for people to support left anti-war, pro-Palestine candidates, so that to the extent that there is a hope of there being a left, center-left coalition, or a coalition that saves the center, it is understood that the way that they can win is to move to the left as opposed to the right.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good point to raise the issue of France for sure, but we have to also remember the US elections are very different. US elections are completely corporately run. Which everything is stacked against anybody who isn't a corporate-backed candidate in one of these corporate-funded parties. And it's an election that starts a year before the actual election, right? Which is very different than other countries. Like, other countries do have very quick elections. It could be a month or 2 month long process. And the amount of money like we spend on elections is so insane. It's like, unless you're like, look how much money Bernie Sanders had to raise to make his election work, both in 2016 and 2020. And that was a very unusual, new kind of situation. And he still had everything rigged against him. And I'm not saying that to like discourage people about third parties at all. I'm a huge proponent of the necessity of third parties in America. I wish we had a different system than we do, but I do think third parties are one tool we can use to push for that system. I just don't know, France should give us hope in the sense that, yeah, the left can win somewhere for sure in like a global North country. But our elections are just so different. Like, we just have to completely upend the entire system in the US, or we're just going to continue to be stuck in this horrific cycle. And that's what third parties can help with.
Okay, so since you mentioned that, before we move next to Gaza, I do want to just play one or two of these just incredible clips about the 2020 anti-Bernie rigging, because I feel like I've been waiting my whole life for this moment, for this kind of recognition. I can't help it. Can we play the first one up? We got cued, Armand.
I got to make one other point. Yeah. So the president talked today about how now it's all the elites who are trying to force him out. Right. Let's remember what happened in 2020. Okay. The president did not run a great primary campaign. He lost badly in Iowa, New Hampshire, and Nevada. He came out of Nevada, and Bernie Sanders looked like the presumptive nominee. And this exact same group of people, the elites, that the president is now deriding as elites. And by the way, they're not. They're Democrats, okay? They're party operatives, they're donors, they're volunteers, decided, and to all the Bernie supporters out there, I'm not judging this positively or negatively, they decided they didn't want Bernie Sanders to be the nominee. They decided that Joe Biden would be the better nominee. And credit, again, to the president. He decided that because he did 8 years as vice president. He did the years in the Senate. He had the record to be a strong president. And so they, through their support behind Joe Biden, and Pete Buttigieg and Elizabeth Warren and Mike Bloomberg and Amy Klobuchar, and I may be forgetting a few others, stepped aside for the candidate who was better. This myth that somehow Joe Biden came in and rescued us. It has been a nationwide movement since Donald Trump was elected president. And in 2020, that nationwide movement said, Joe, you're the best guy, let's go. Right now, they don't think he is.
Wow, I had not seen that clip. Wow.
No, that was Representative Adam Smith from Washington State saying out loud what we have been accused of being tinfoil hat wearing weirdos for years for arguing.
Did you get a phone call from him saying, Brianna, you were right? I think, no, it's crazy. They called us all insane. They were like, oh, it's crazy to say it was rigged. You might as well just be 9/11 truthers.
Exactly. And would you believe, Rania, that wasn't the only one? Harold Ford also took to Fox News to say almost the exact same thing. And before we play that one, I would just like to point out the reason these guys are bristling is because Biden called his detractors elites. To be clear, they're not getting on the air to say the Bernie bros were right. I'm so sorry. No. They're coming on to say these so-called elites, they're not really elites, which of course they are, but these elites are the ones that won it for you in 2020. So how dare you bite the hand that feeds you?
Yeah, we rigged it for you. How are you going to turn us like that? That's hilarious.
All right, indulge me, would you? I just want to play this Harold Ford one as well, because it's outrageous.
I resent President Biden going on my friend Joe Scarborough's show this morning and calling, I assume, people like me elites. I would remind the president that in 2020, if you want to view me as an elite, I was an elite that supported you in 2020, that said that we should do everything we possibly could to advantage you against Bernie Sanders, because I thought Bernie Sanders' politics were detrimental to the party and to the country. But I wasn't being called an elite. I was an elected official. Some of these people on TV talking about this campaign were elected officials. We put our name on the ballot just like you have. You've been more successful, reached higher heights, but we put our name on the ballot. So I resent that a bit. But I get where you're coming from. If I were in your spot and I were running ahead in the polls, independents were supporting me, I didn't think I'd be a drag on Senate candidates in the toughest races in the country, which could flip the Senate to Republican and give Republicans an opportunity to either block or advance nominees to the appellate court, district court, and Supreme Court. I don't understand what you're saying, but the numbers don't favor what you're doing and what you're saying. So I'd dial that back a bit. If you're serious about going forward, then get on the road. Give me 3 events a day.
I mean, man, he's salty. He's like,
So people who aren't familiar or don't remember, he was one of these guys, one of these representatives, I think from Tennessee, former Congress member, who was one of the many, like, I think I'm going to be the first Black president before Obama took the wind out of their sails. I feel like there's a whole cohort of like Gen X Black guys who really thought they were going to be the ones and who have been a little bit lost ever since Obama was president. But like, here he is, he's sitting on a Fox 5 panel, bristling also, it seems, mostly at the idea that he has been called an elite after he rolled out the red carpet for Joe Biden and ensured that he was going to be victorious in 2020. That's why they're mad. Very similarly, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say it makes sense. I'd be mad too if I was in their shoes. I'd be like, dude, what are you doing? But go ahead, please.
Yeah, because the funny point is that they're this close to accurately calling Joe Biden out for a faux populist rhetoric. When Joe Biden says all these people are elites that are out to get me, he is wrong. They are right to call Joe Biden out for the doublespeak, but not for they don't care that he's not actually, like, they're mad that Biden is also an elitist and is trying to pretend that he's not, as opposed to being like, you're using faux populist rhetoric and populism is good actually, and the working class is good actually, and you're betraying their interests. No, they're like, no, I'm mad you're betraying our affluent interests. There was one other one of these that maybe we'll slice it afterward and I won't make you listen to. But the number one argument also does seem to be, there was a primary. We had a primary. This is, democracy now. If Joe Biden is the nominee, then you can't be mad at it because the people chose Joe Biden. And I think Case Study again did an amazing supercut of that famous clip from Simone Sanders saying, there will be no debate. There will be no primary. And what she's saying now, trying to say, well, the voters chose, the Black voters chose. You can't now undermine what everybody wanted in the primary and swap him out now. In fact, there's this it's racist to want Kamala to be the nominee argument that is
against the white man.
Difficult to parse.
Yeah. Wow.
Right, because Black voters chose Biden, having a Black woman nominee would be racist. And that's why we have so many Kamala people and Bernie bros joining together around a coconut of love.
I didn't even know that was happening, by the way. I didn't know there was like a Kamala coconut people Bernie bro thing happening.
It was a thing. It was a thing. I think mostly in jest from the left, but it's weird to find yourself fighting side by side along the most vicious foot soldiers of the internet, the K-Hive, all because you jointly are upset with Joe Biden.
Oh my goodness. I couldn't have imagined this would be.
Thank you for indulging me. We stayed with that much longer than I had planned to. I'm sorry. We do have to get to and we should, and I want to get to the seriousness that's happening, which is this threat of regional war in the Middle East. This is an area of some expertise for you. And I have been seeing on the periphery of my news vision as I've been on vacation this last week or so, arguments about escalation with Hezbollah. Of course, this is not new, but what is relatively new is Hezbollah coming out, I believe, yesterday, saying that it is sort of in lockstep with Hamas in terms of negotiations, saying as soon as Hamas feels like there is an adequate ceasefire deal, we also will stop our fighting, that we are doing this in service of the interests of the people of Palestine. And along with that, we have new reporting out that Benjamin Netanyahu has come forward with another one of these statements saying, yeah, sure, I'm for a ceasefire. And one part of the deal has to be that Israel can continue its offensive, which, of course, is not what a ceasefire, in fact, is. What's going on here, Rania?
Well, what's going on here is what's been going on for the past, I would say, since October 7th, which is the Israelis have intentionally sabotaged every single ceasefire proposal that's come forward. Hamas has continued to agree with them. And Israel does it under the guise of, oh, like Hamas is not agreeing to what we need. But like you just said, every single time Israel's issue with these ceasefires is they refuse to agree to a permanent one. They want all of their hostages released during a temporary ceasefire, and they want to be able to continue their offensive across Gaza, essentially continue their genocide. And of course, nobody would agree to that because the idea of having hostages, of having Israeli prisoners, is to give you leverage. And if you let go of all your leverage, then you have nothing left. So obviously, and this has happened repeatedly. I mean, months ago, Breakthrough News had done basically had gone back and looked at every ceasefire proposal and that Hamas had agreed to, and it was 10. And each time, and that was 2 months ago. So there's been a few more since. And each time, same problem. Israel's the one who says, nope, not going to do this. We refuse to agree to a permanent ceasefire. And like you mentioned with Lebanon, I mean, so I'm talking to you from Lebanon, where I live. And since October 8th, there has been this war taking place between the Israelis and Hezbollah, mostly isolated, though not always, to very close to the border, South Lebanon, northern Israel. And as a result, I mean, it hasn't been anywhere near as vicious as what's taken place in Gaza. But as a result, Israel's also constantly talking about the need to escalate further into the north. They keep saying if there is a ceasefire with Hamas in Gaza, they will turn all of their efforts to a war on Lebanon. And then, of course, like you mentioned, Hezbollah's whole thing is, on October 8th, they launched attacks on Israel in solidarity with the Palestinians in Gaza, and also as a preemptive deterrence against an Israeli attack on Lebanon, which Israel actually had planned to attack Lebanon after October 7th. But like Joe Biden got on the phone and said, no, don't do it. So all that's to say, Hezbollah has attached its holding its fire to a ceasefire in Gaza. For them, until there's a ceasefire in Gaza, until the genocide stops, they will continue doing what they're doing. However, they've done it within the confines of these kinds of like unofficial rules of engagement. Because both sides, when it comes to the Israelis, when it comes to Hezbollah, neither side actually wants an all-out war because it would be devastating. It would be devastating for Lebanon. And it would also be devastating for Israel because Hezbollah is a much more powerful and better armed organization than Hamas is. And I can get into the specifics as to why. I'm not sure, like, if you've done any coverage of Lebanon. I think you have a bit on your show. But if you'll
mostly
allow
probably
me,
when you were last on. Please, I'd love you to get in more detail.
Well, in terms of just understanding, Lebanon's a bit of a more, seems like a bit of a more complicated place. But in terms of understanding what Hezbollah is, Lebanon borders Israel and has had issues with the Israelis since Israel's creation. When Israel was created, obviously, it was created through a mass campaign vicious campaign of ethnic cleansing of Palestinians called the Nakba, which led to 750,000 Palestinians basically being ethnically cleansed from their homeland. A lot of them ended up in Lebanon, in refugee camps in Lebanon. And obviously with the intention to eventually go back home. And that, by the way, those refugee camps exist until this day. And so throughout this time, Israel has repeatedly attacked Lebanon for a couple of reasons. One, because Palestinians, obviously intending to go back to their homelands, set up groups to fight to go back to their homelands from wherever they were refugees in, and one of those places was Lebanon. So there would be fighting between the Israelis and the Palestinians in that context. But also, Israel repeatedly bombed Lebanon, and during a civil war in Lebanon that started in the late 70s and lasted all throughout the 80s, Israel actually repeatedly invaded Lebanon and occupied southern Lebanon for years. The invasion that occurred in 1982 was so vicious. They put the city of Beirut, the capital of Lebanon, under siege, just bombed areas of it to smithereens, starved the population. I think in the course of like 3 months, they killed 20,000 people. It was so bad that Ronald Reagan, who was US president at the time, called up the Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin and told him, this is the Holocaust. You're carrying out a Holocaust in Lebanon right now, in Beirut. Stop. And there was this whole back and forth between them where Menachem Begin was like, no, I know what the word Holocaust means. Like, this is not a Holocaust. And Reagan was like, no, you need to stop. And within 20 minutes, it stopped. And I just point that out to say that American presidents do have the power to put a stop to what the Israelis are doing. Joe Biden just chooses not to. But anyways, even though they stopped, I mean, I also want to mention, Brianna, that my family, the Israelis occupied up to my family's village. So my family's home was occupied by Israeli soldiers. I mean, they didn't kill anyone because that was like what they did to my family's home was like the least vicious thing the Israelis did in Lebanon. They just left their feces everywhere and drew Star of David graffiti. Yeah, they're not the nicest house guests. But the point is that
Rania, I didn't realize you had such a personal connection to it.
I mean, yeah, look, my family is Lebanese. And they were impacted by all of the bombing campaigns that Israel carried out in Lebanon. And then, after, all this took place, Israel continued to occupy southern Lebanon, from 1985, which was during the Lebanese Civil War, up until 2000. And in that time, Israel committed atrocity after atrocity. They ran torture facilities that you can still go tour in the South, by the way. But they funded a fascist militia called the South Lebanon Army to carry out some of their atrocities. They oversaw massacres of Palestinians. They massacred Palestinians. They massacred Lebanese, and on and on and on. They don't have a good reputation in this country. So all that's to say, Hezbollah emerged in the south of Lebanon as a resistance to that occupation. And in 2000, Hezbollah kicked the Israelis out. It was a huge victory in the region, not just in Lebanon, because it was the first time that Arabs were able to liberate their land from Israel, which was supposed to be this, most powerful army in the region, maybe even in the world to some degree. And so all that's to say, Hezbollah is because you'll hear a lot, like people who are detractors will say, oh, these are just Iranian agents. This is a proxy of Iran. No. These are Lebanese people who picked up arms and organized themselves to defend their homes, their families, and their land from colonizers, from occupiers. That's basically like as simple as it gets.
Hey YouTube, thanks for watching. Just a reminder that this is a podcast. You can catch an extra premium episode every Monday for $5 a month at patreon.com/badfaithpodcast. That's patreon.com/badfaithpodcast for $5 a month, an extra episode every week. Additionally, please do consider liking this video, subscribing to this channel. It helps us out. It helps independent media beat the algorithm. We appreciate you. And as always, keep the faith.